Whiskey. Things were fine until you saw it on the shelf. You were so fine until they took you down, opened you up, and passed you around. Wynonie Harris. Hello to all, and welcome to the Ear-Wicker podcast. Follow along with our host, Vince Corkery, as he discusses a broad range of musical topics, with interviews of top players, club owners, producers, and engineers that make it all happen. Your virtual backstage pass. Remember to like and subscribe to this podcast, and of course, it's free.
Hello, and welcome to Ear-Wicker Podcast. And today, we have a very special guest, man of many talents, and an old friend. We have John Higgins. Welcome, John. Thanks for showing up today on a snowy day. Appreciate it.
Well, glad to be here, Vince. Really am glad. I've listened to your other podcasts, and I'm really glad you're doing this because I think a lot of people are finding stuff out about a lot of folks. It's really interesting.
Well, that's good. That's a big part of what we do here.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, but so where did you grow up? Are you Missourian?
Well, I was born in Washington, Missouri, the corncob pipe capital of the world.
Okay.
And when I was about 2, we moved to Kirkwood. My dad got a job down at what was then ACIC and is now, I think, the NGA, they call it. Your brother worked there.
Right.
Yeah. And so we moved to Kirkwood. The commute was much better for him than driving from Washington and back every day, and that was before 44 was around. He's on old 66. So grew up there for the most part, and I lived down in Springfield for a while and moved back here and lived in Webster for a while, and then back to Kirkwood. I lived in Kirkwood, bought a house in Kirkwood, lived there for 25 years, then retired to Carter County, where I'm at now, down outside of Van Buren.
Which is Missouri you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Well, how did you get into music? What was your first instrument?
Well, it's a funny story. It's when I talk to people about this, and my contention is for a lot of us, I feel like music sort of picks us, that we don't pick it. And I had seen the Beatles, I think it was like February of 64, they were on Ed Sullivan, and I had just turned 9 years old. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, wow, check these guys out. They're like nothing I'd ever seen. And I'm kind of like thinking, they're weird, but wow, check it out. It's like really cool. These guys are something. And then the girls are losing their minds, out in the audience, and I'm like, wow, this is really something. Well, within about a month, this guy showed up in my grade school, and he worked for a private company that offered music lessons. And I'm just a bored kid. I'm sitting there in my third grade classroom, and he came in at the end of the day and talked to the class for like 15 minutes, passed out these forms, and I'm sure, I still don't know how it happened. I'm sure I was bored. And I sat there and filled in my name and address and a phone number and forged my mom's name, all in pencil, of course. But I never turned it in. I don't know what happened. But anyway, my sister had signed up for piano lessons. So they called, and I just happened to be walking through the front hallway, and my mom was on the phone. And she looks at me and, crooks her finger and said, come here, And she's talking to, she goes, I've got this guy on the phone here. He says that you signed up for piano lessons. I said, well, I didn't. I said, I don't know what I said to her. And she's just looking at me like, yeah, you're still being a jerk, kid. But anyhow, she said, well, do you want to take piano lessons? I was like, no, not really. And I heard the guy on the phone say, well, we offer guitar lessons too. And she looks at me and she goes, do you want to try playing the guitar? And I thought back to the Beatles. I'd just seen them like 2 or 3 weeks before. Yeah. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay. And this guy came to our house once a week, and I took lessons from him for 3 years. Right out of the chute, he taught me how to sight read. Oh. But he also helped me learn like some Beatles songs. And he was a great teacher. I wish I could remember his name, but he really got me started off on the right foot.
Wow.
And so, but there was always music around our house. My folks both played piano and sang. My sisters were always listening to records. But we all messed around with music somehow or another. There's always music going on at the house. So, but man, I'll tell you, once that guitar, I just fell in with it. It just became a natural thing, and I just couldn't get enough of it when I was a kid playing. Wow. Man, I mean, every day after school, I'd either playing ball or in my room playing the guitar, one of the two.
Yeah. Well, what were some of your first bands? Do you remember how old?
Yeah, I remember a band that we had in 5th grade. So Pat O'Connor. Pat
from the Bel Airs,
world-class drummer, man, and his dad was Rick O'Connor, and Rick played all over. Mr. O'Connor played all over the place. He played down at Gaslight Square a lot. I think he even drummed with Danny Thomas's orchestra for a while. Great old school swing drummer. I can remember seeing his kit. He'd have it set up home. He had skinheads on it and the whole thing, these old Ludwig kits, and it was just like, wow. But anyway, so Pat's a couple of years younger than I am, but, my older sister and Pat's older sister were best friends. So we go back and forth all the time. So we had another buddy in the neighborhood that played guitar. And I think in 5th grade, we started up a band called the Alternating Current. And so that's how that kind of started. And then,
electrifying.
Oh, yeah, baby. You better believe it. I had a Kent guitar and a Kent amplifier that my mom got for me with Top Value stamps.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yep. And so, that's kind of how it, and it was such a great time for music. There was so much happening and so much excitement. And, but the other side of the coin is that my mom's side of the family is from down in Christian County, just south of Springfield. Springfield's Greene County, and then Christian County's the next county south. And Ozark is the county seat of Christian County, and that's where my mom's family's all from, around Ozark, Linden, all there. They settled there right after the Civil War. So my grandpa was down there, and we used to go down there a lot. And there was a group of fellas not just men, but women too, that in the square in Ozark, there was a couple old empty storefronts. And every Saturday night, they would get together in this vacant storefront with potbelly stove, and they'd just play old country stuff, old-timey stuff, and singing. And I kind of always liked the folky stuff. Like my folks really liked the Kingston Trio, and they were always on at our house. And I always kind of liked. There was something about that folky thing I kind of dug, but I loved the Beatles and the Stones and even the Motown stuff. So much music going on.
Yeah.
And I had gone down there to stay with my grandpa. My cousin Frank and I had gone down there to stay a week with him. And I think by that time I was probably about 11. Oh. And I'd been playing the guitar for a couple of years. And, this whole music revolution is going on. And my grandpa was just an old school country guy, fox hunter, did all the country stuff, great guy. But I think that he sensed that he had some sort of opportunity because he knew I was playing the guitar, but all this rock stuff's going on and crazy stuff. So he took me over to the square on Saturday night, and we were sitting around, I didn't know what to expect. No. And we go in there, and there's a guy with the banjo, a couple fiddle players, a woman that was singing, a couple of guys playing guitar, and probably 30 people all standing around the walls listening, and they're playing all this stuff. And I'll tell you, man, it got its hooks in me, even as an 11-year-old kid. And I remember I went home, and I went down to Mel Bay. I grew up 2.5 blocks from Mel's store. And I was like, man, I got to find some of this stuff. And I found this book. I can't. It's like called Folk Songs of America, of the World, or something like that. And I bought it, and it's got all this folk stuff in it. And I just started learning it, and I loved it. And then all the country rock stuff started happening, and there's a lot of country sounds in that. But I still love the rock stuff. So it's just all this divergence of styles. And like I said, I really feel like the music sort of picked me. It just got a hold of me and said, "Come on, let's go."
Well, you also have Luthier, background, repairing instruments, and you were also in the recording industry for a while, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of different, different categories of music.
Well, I worked when I was a senior in high school. I worked for a roofing company for one summer, doing nothing but tearing off roofs and bucking shingles on your shoulder up a ladder. And I figured out that after a summer of that I never wanted to really do that again. And then I got a job in a greenhouse, and that was even crazier. But the good part of that was I learned how to drive a truck. So that was valuable. But, I just love the music so much, and I'm like, what can I do here? I don't want to work in a greenhouse. I mean, it's all honorable work.
Yeah,
Labor is honorable work, man.
Right.
But I just started trying to just figure out anything I could do to make a living that was attached to music. And that involved, I think I wrecked one of my first guitars when I was in about 6th grade. And my dad was a super handy guy, and he always had a shop in the basement. And so he helped me cobble it back together, and I thought, well, that's pretty neat that you could resurrect this thing. And I bought an old telly when I was 15, and I got some fret wire from Rob We're Lucky and refretted the guitar. Whoa. And, tried to learn. And I built a guitar when I was 18 out of this Irving Sloan classical guitar construction book. And, I mean, it was shaped like a guitar. It was no masterwork, I can tell you that. But it's just like from there on, and then Bill and Janet Boyer. I'd gone to school with Susan Boyer. She was in my class at Kirkwood High.
And they're from...
They started Music Folk. Bill and Janet started Music Folk, I think, I don't know, maybe in 73 or 4. I mean, right around then. I'm probably off by a couple of years. But anyhow, they... one day, Bill called me up and said, hey, I hear you're fixing some instruments. We have some stuff over here that needs some work. And I was, 19 or 20. And so I went over there, and there's a little cinder block building in the back of the parking lot back there at the very end. And Bill just let me have the space, and I built a workbench and bought some tools and sponged some tools off my dad and just started fixing guitars. And then Bob Abrams and I shared some shop space under Music Folk for a couple of years. I learned a ton from Bob. Great guy. We became really good friends, and Bob's super talented on all these different levels. And I saw what he was doing. I'm like, man, he's playing. He's making records. He's building banjos. He's fixing guitars. He's doing all this stuff. And it's like, that's his job. It's like he doesn't have another. I'm like, I think I'm at least going to try this. So I tried to just keep an open mind and build my skill set and be prepared when the opportunities came my way, And so, and I've always been fascinated with recording and microphones and gear and all that stuff, man. I love all of it. I still do, and I love guitars and building guitars and restoring guitars. I did a lot of restoration work for a lot of people. I was so fortunate, man. Yeah. So many people trusted me to do this work over the years, and it's just like, I'm not even going to start naming names because I will leave out people because my memory's not the greatest anymore. But there's so many people that were so generous and shoveled the work my way. Right. And
how many neck resets do you think you've done over the years?
I know that so I closed up the shop in 2019. That's when I quit doing, work for the public. And that year, I reset 43 necks.
Just that year?
Just that year. I ran 225 or 230 guitars through the shop that year. But there wasn't a single fret dress or a setup or a pickup replacement or, hey, put these gears on. There was none of that. I mean, all these guitars are like great old guitars that need to be brought back into the world, you know. And so, the neck reset really became a thing, and it was great because usually that's only one part of the equation to get, because a lot of times people shave the bridge down and that ruins the bridge. You can't reset a neck to a shaved down bridge. The frets would be shot. There might be a crack, a couple loose braces. So it's a whole end-to-end thing that's a weeks-long proposition. I remember at one point I had 52 guitars in the shop, and I only had room for about 15 out at a time. But the great thing was all these dealers, all these vintage guitar dealers, they don't care. They don't want it next week. They don't have a gig on Friday. They don't need the guitar on Friday night. You know, so they're just like, they don't care. When they just want it back, and when they get it back, they just want it right. You know, so I just, you know, it fits my. You know, I worked by myself for 20 years, and people are like, dude, you're a weirdo, you know, but it just sort of fit my thing because you need to focus on that stuff. You need a certain degree of focus, and you don't want people coming in and bothering you. And, you know, and I had people offer me opportunities to take the shop out and build out a bigger shop space and go into business with people. And I came close a couple times, but I thought, you know, I worked down at Gravity Strings for 13 years. And Jimmy Gravity, man, I'll tell you what, I learned so much working down there. I met so many people, and Jimmy was really kind to offer me a job and get me in there. And we worked really well together for a long, long time. But one of the things that was difficult about that was, you know, I'm back in the back at my bench, and I've got some, you know, pre-war Martin half apart on my bench, and somebody comes in and they need to talk about a guitar they've dragged in, and I need to leave my bench and go up in front and talk to them. So it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And, you know, it just suited me better to not be open to the public. And fortunately, I had enough support. And then there were, you know, there's plenty of guitar players around that knew I was doing work, and that they had.
Well,
my phone
word gets
number.
around quickly, I think.
Yeah. So, you know, but like I said, I am so grateful to so many people that supported me in my efforts with my guitar work. You know, really, and the same with playing music. I mean, so many people have been generous with their time and their venues, and you know, it's.
Well, you usually, you know, like you do like three different jobs in the music world, and usually one kind of stands out, but all three stand out in your situation.
Well, that's kind of you, and
that's true though.
Well, thanks, I appreciate that. You know, when I left Gravity, I went to work over at Magitrax for a couple of years as their audio production manager, because I had been recording stuff for people and making records and produced a few records and engineered a few records. And whenever it came time to the replication, I'd take the masters over to a Magitrax. And one day a letter showed up in my mailbox, and they offered me a job as audio production manager. And, you know, they're like, we love your work and you're meticulous and on and on and on, you know. And so I was like, well, you know, the time had sort of come for me to move on from Gravity. And Jimmy and Mike Newman and Billy Barnett, all the guys down there, they're all still good friends of mine. I go down there and hang out. Yeah. And if you haven't been down to Gravity in a while, I would encourage you to go down there, because it is a trove of stuff. It just really, there's no other place like it in the city, you know. But anyway, so that was my first exposure to computer-based. That's where I learned to use a Mac and Pro Tools was there, and that was in the late 90s. Wow. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then through a series of events, the recording world, the replication world changed dramatically within a period of a couple of years. It went from the cassette to the DVD. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it was like a whole other world. So I decided that the business had changed enough that I needed to move on from Magitrax. And Bob and Bonnie, I'll always appreciate what they did for me. And Gene Carroll, Gene was working there too at the time. And it was really a very helpful, a heavy learning curve, but I learned an awful lot in a short amount of time. And Mike Morgan at Morgan Music in Lebanon, Missouri, who I'd done a lot of work for when I worked at Gravity, Jimmy was like, whenever anybody from south of 44 would call with a guitar, he'd hand me the phone, he'd go, talk to him.
Oh.
So I got to know a whole lot of people, and Mike had Morgan Music down in Lebanon, Missouri, and they were a Martin dealer, and they sent us a lot of warranty work because we were a Martin warranty repair station. But he sent me a bunch of customers. These guys been out, they're out in the middle, they're playing bluegrass, they got 70-year-old Martin that needs a whole bunch of work, and so he sent me all this work. Well, when I left Gravity, Mike went through every name in the phone book, every John Higgins in the phone book. He called everyone till he found me.
Oh.
And that's the way Mike Morgan was. And
Wow.
he's like, look, I've got this guitar. That's how he'd start the conversation. I said, Mike, I'm not doing repair work. That time I was just building guitars. I'd gotten this niche 7-string nylon string thing going through Rick Hayden, who turned me on to John Pizzarelli. I built some guitars for John and some other people, and those guys were 7-string players. And they had started to get into this South American stuff, I think like Joe Beam or something. I'm not sure how you say, but there's a group of composers out of South America, and they played these 7-string guitars and nylon string. But they're playing all this jazz stuff. And at the time, in the late 90s, there really weren't any 7-string nylon strings unless you went to a builder and said, hey, man, make me one. So I talked to Rick a bunch, and we came up with some ideas, and I started building the guitars. It was a radius fingerboard. Most classicals have a flat board, and we cheated the spacing in a little bit, even though it's a 7-string, messed with the bracing, a real shallow cutaway.
Yes.
So it worked good for that material. And then I got to a point where it was like, I either have to take it out of my basement shop, or I just have to I have to tell people I'm going to make 4 guitars a year. Because you need a spray booth, you need all kinds of stuff, and you need room to store wood and on and on and on. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, I just didn't have I didn't have a good gut feeling about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can still build 3 or 4 guitars a year and keep it here and keep the repair work going. And then it shifted into all this restoration work through a couple of dealers, in particular Mike Morgan down in Lebanon, who, went all through the phone book, called every John Higgins in the phone book till he found me, badgered me finally into taking repair work, and that opened up a door, and then the word got around. And every dealer that would call me, I'd say, look, here's the deal. I do work for everybody. I'm not going to play the music store game, or you don't like this guy and I'm not going to do work for you. I said, I don't play that. I do restoration and repair work, and that's what I do, and I'll be glad to do your work. And everybody was cool with it.
Yeah.
It worked out.
That was good philosophy. Yeah.
And as time went along, I just did bigger, more complicated jobs, and I was able to farm out the smaller stuff to other people, which was fine by me because I mean, after you do a fret dress on a guitar 10 million times, it's like, well,
Well, yeah, I think, your calling was to do more, to be a little more detailed. And, harder work, really.
And I'll tell you, I worked on so many family guitars. Like, this was my dad's guitar. This was my grandpa's guitar. And I started playing guitar, and it's been in the closet for 30 years. And they opened the case up, and here's some pre-war Martin or Gibson or some, late 40s J45 or something, and you look at the guitar and it's just like, man, this is like a world beater of a guitar. It just needs a whole lot of work. And that's what I loved doing. And man,
bring it back to life.
You get those, getting those guitars back out in the world so they can make music again was really just, I absolutely loved it.
Well,
yeah.
we're fortunate that you do that, really.
Well, yeah. Now, I've still, every once in a while, I'd say in the last 5 years, I've probably fixed about 10 guitars. But I don't take work from anybody anymore.
Yeah. You're semi-retired, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I'm still building guitars. I've been building a lot of Tele-style guitars the last few years. I've made some basses. Just trying to, I've got a really nice shop, a good studio set up, so able to.
You're doing what you want to do.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Well, this is a beautiful thing, man,
It is. Vince, every morning I wake up, and I am so thankful for what I've been gifted. Just really very fortunate.
Yeah, well, that's
very,
great.
very fortunate.
Well, another great talent of yours is the pedal steel, and not a lot of people around here do that. There are a few, but they don't have. To me, I mean, you can swing on that like nobody's business, and that is country music, if you ask me. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I've spent 50 years in that seat playing the steel, and I tell people it's like
embarrassed.
I should be like way better than I am.
Well, isn't that always?
But the thing I tell people about the steel is when they say, "Man, I'd really like to play the steel," I said, "Well, you just have to be ready to put the time in the seat." And even after 50 years, if I don't, when I go back to Carter County, I always set up my steel either the day I get back or the day after. But sometimes stuff gets in the way, and I might not play it for a week. And I will sit down, and, man, there is nothing that will make a monkey out of you faster than a pedal steel guitar.
Wow.
I mean, you can sound so incredibly bad on one of those things, and it's just like, but you sit down and you just keep grinding and grinding.
Yeah.
But I always loved the steel, and in high school, you started hearing it more like in bands like Poco and some of the early Eagles stuff. I love Commander Cody.
Yeah.
Leon Russell did an album called Hank's Back, and it was all Hank Williams, almost all Hank Williams stuff, but a bunch of other country stuff. Great steel playing. I don't remember who, and of course Lloyd Green and J.D. Maness all over like Dylan recordings and stuff, and Sweetheart of the Rodeo record.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's steel, man. It just was like, oh, man, I just like really got its hooks in me, And I just started playing it. I bought this Winnie Winston book, and it's still in publication. A lot of people, it's still what they use when they first want to. It even showed you how to set the guitar up and how to take it out of the case, which is a trip because the thing's flipped upside down.
Yeah.
And you got to know how to do this stuff.
Right.
But I just love the steel. You can do so much with it. And I've played straight up country with it. I've of course played in blues and rock and stuff, but played in some original bands like the Cave States with Chris Graybow and Danny Kaffner, Todd Snitzer, and all that bunch. And, it's all original material. And they're just like, well, just put some stuff in there, So it's a real different approach. It's more like pads and long legato lines. It's not a whole bunch of picking,
Right.
So you can really cover a lot of ground. And I know a couple of the studios in town, Sawhorse in particular, and Jason McIntyre, really generous with if people came in and said, "Hey, I'm cutting a demo, I need a steel player," and they'd call me. So I got to do a lot of session work for people, which was really, really great. But I just still love the steel, and John Stewart.
Yes.
So John's a bass player, guitar player. He played in Spats, one version of that, and. But John's also a vintage instrument dealer, and his specialty is archtop guitars. So I wound up doing a lot of work for John. And I was playing a Show Pro, the Lloyd Green at Jeff Surratt's got a great steel company. It's a wood guitar. It's slightly smaller than a Show Bud. It's a little bit lighter, but it's still a wood frame, wood neck, the whole deal. It's got that old real close to the old Showbud sound. And to find an early Lloyd Green Showbud is next to impossible. And so Stuart had called me and he said, hey, man, I'm coming down. I got a couple of guitars. He goes, look, I got this buddy of mine. He bought a new Beard Dobro. His dad was a steel player. He passed away. He's got his dad's steel. And would you be interested? And it's like, well, I had my old Professional at the time. I had this Show Pro. I'm like, well, John, I already got 2 steels. I said, probably not. He goes, I'm going to throw it in the car. So he comes down. He brings the arch tops in. We're talking about these guitars. One, I forget what it was. It was a Stromberg. Just an incredible guitar. It's the only one I've ever worked on. Just a phenomenal, 19 inches across the bottom bout. Probably the most incredible sounding arch top I've ever played. So we're all ate up with this guitar. And then he leaves, and I said, okay, man, I'll see you later. And he leaves, and I'm down the shop, and I hear somebody pounding on the back door. I go back up, and it's Stuart. And I was like, what's up? And he goes, oh, I forgot I got that steel in the trunk. And I'm like, well, okay. So I go out in the driveway, he pops the trunk, and I look in the trunk, and there's a Showbud case sitting in there. I knew the case because it's exactly like my 73 Professional, which is a double neck, and it's the exact same case. And I'm like, oh, it's a double neck. I don't really want a double neck. But I looked at the case, and there's not a mark on this case. I mean, not a mark on it. It looks like it just came out off the showroom floor. And I'm like, holy cow. I said, well, let's pop it open. And I open up the lid, and I looked at it, and I immediately knew what it was because there's 4 knee levers and 3 pedals for an E9 neck, and where the back neck, the C6 would be, there's nothing. And I'm like, this can't possibly be what I think it is. And I said, latched the case up, got the thing out. I didn't even take it inside. I put it down in the driveway. I was so excited. And I popped it up, and I didn't put the legs on it or anything. I just grabbed it out and flipped it over. It's 73 LDG, 73 Lloyd Green. They started making that model, I think, in May of 73. So this is December of 73. It's the first year they made it. And it's like a dream guitar for me. It's a big guitar. Aesthetically, it's a gorgeous guitar. It sounds like old country music. It's all the stuff. Every time I walk by it and look at it, I want to sit down and play it. I'm just still ate up with the thing.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah,
absolutely. And so thanks to John Stewart, I wound up with this guitar, and it really sort of helped. I mean, I still love the steel. I love playing. I was playing all the time. I was playing 100 steel shows a year probably. But when I got the LDG, it was just like, it just lit the fire under me all over again. Wow. So it was really cool. And that Show Pro was the one I was playing when we did that Always Patsy Cline show.
Okay,
Yeah, which was a great guitar, real solid, sounded great. And I needed something that would stay in tune and be really, really good for that show. And that show was really
it was fun.
It was a great experience. It really was.
It really was.
Yeah, really was. Yeah,
felt like we were really, really doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, baby.
So, what would you say is maybe one of your favorite gigs you've done over the years? Do you have any favorite gigs?
I have a few. Well, I'll tell you, that Klein show, it wasn't like anything I'd ever done. I mean, I took 2 months off from it. I probably missed 60 shows, and I still played it 140 times. Yeah. And people be like, how could you go over there every night and play that same thing over and over and over again? Well, I'll tell you one thing. Zoe Vanderhart and Jackie Petrocha, the two women that were the two, there's only 2 actors in the play, they brought it every night. And to see these professionals, it's like, this is how you do this, and to see them show up every night, they didn't care if there's 10 people out there or 510 people. It's the same show every night. So you're like, well, I need to get with it. And, you learn all the parts. And I also think that the thing I've loved about playing that show, so many of the songs are in like E flat, B flat, F. Yes. And I was like, man, if I can learn to play all this stuff, it's really going to be helpful. And so, but you get into all this nuance. It's like I'm playing the same line in the same spot every night, and it's 3 measures long, and it's 11 notes. Wouldn't it bore you out of your mind? It's like, well, it could, but you could also just like dig into it. And it's like, how awesome can I make this? What's the best tone I can generate?
Yeah.
How in tune? How expressive can I make it? And that's sort of where I always went with it. So it really, in a lot of ways, made me.
It showed,
It made me a better musician in a lot of ways. You know, not just a better player, but a better musician. And that's what I see a lot of times. I see a lot of people that are technically great players, monster players, but they're not the best musician. You know, I'm somebody that wants to work on a group sound and lift the singer up and be there for the melody and all these other things, you know. So that Klein show was one. You and I played together in the Rounders, the Missouri Rounders, with Thane Bradford and Bob Breidenbach and Charlie Pfeffer. And the whole idea behind that band, which was really kind of a harebrained idea, was to try to arrange the songs in a way where there's a whole bunch of space in there. Like when you listen to a recording, an instrument comes in behind the singer on a verse and paints those windows, and then it goes away. And then on the refrain, these two other instruments come, and that's sort of what we were trying to build there. And it's not an easy thing to do. No. You know, it's
like
really
live
not.
recording, like you were taking the idea of the studio and bringing it.
Right. This produced arrangement, you know, but there were a couple of Rounders gigs that I'll just sort of never forget. There were one in particular at Focal Point that just was like really, really quite a night. And I remember playing down at the tap room with the Mules one night, and we were playing in the Elliott room, which is downstairs, and there was just a whole bunch of people there, and the energy was great. And Thane was playing fiddle with us at that point. It was Thane and Charlie and Mike Prokoff and I. And that first set, I will never forget. And we never used a set list. I usually just called the songs, and once in a while Mike would call a song, or Charlie would. Once in a while Thane would. But it was just it was like an hour-long set, and the whole thing just happened. And I can't really find the words, but it was just really a magic 1 hour. And I'll never forget it. It was just really a beautiful thing.
Cool.
But I've been fortunate to share the stage with so many great players. All kinds of people. I mean, you and I have played together a whole bunch,
a long time,
different settings, and but I've been fortunate that a lot of people have included me in their projects, and you know, I've been able to play a whole variety of music, which has been a lot of fun. It sure has.
Well, conversely, do you have any worst gigs?
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you the worst gig I ever played. Well, there have been. I mean, anybody that's played music for any length of time got a raft of them. But the worst one I can remember, I was over in Illinois playing. I think it might have been Swansea, and I'm not going to say who I was playing with. It was a 3-piece band, guitar, bass, and drums. And we played everything from like Count Basie to Robert Palmer. And I was playing electric guitar I think I was around maybe in my very early 30s. It was right after River City Rhythm had broken up.
Okay. Yeah.
And so all we did was weddings and private parties. I mean, it's just a money gig, you know. And so we're over there and we're playing this wedding reception. And it's in a VFW hall. And we were supposed to play from like 8 to 11. And we played the first 2.5 hours till 10:30, and like nobody cared about any. Well, the groom's father was after us all night to turn the PA down. And then he got really drunk. And the last time he tried to get up on the stage to come and accost us, and he was so drunk he fell down and fell off the stage. And that created a whole scene. And so it's 10:30, and finally these people get out and start dancing. They're all just as drunk can be. And they're like, woo, you know, dancing and having a big time. Well, 11 o'clock comes. They say, thanks a lot, folks. We're done. Have a good night. Well, here they come. Oh, no, you know, we'll give you another $100, you know, to play for another half hour. Well, this keeps going on and on and on. And and about 11:30, there's a big kerfuffle in the back of the room, and everybody goes running back there, and I heard the bride screaming back there. And I look back, and all of a sudden, it's like I hear the father of the bride is yelling, "What'd you hit him for?" Oh. And the crowd kind of moves back, and there's this guy laying on the floor. He's knocked out cold, and the groom's standing there over him. Well, it was the bride's ex-husband decided he'd gotten drunk and decided he needed to come to the reception and let everybody know what he thought. And so the groom knocked him out cold. And so I'm not making this up. And so we go on, and the next thing you know, it's 1:00 in the morning. We have been playing for 5 hours, and they won't stop. They just keep throwing the money on stage, money on stage. And one of the guys in the band was all about the money. I mean, all about the money. And so it got to be 1:30. I got to pack up and drive home. I got to drive home. It's almost an hour to get home. It's 1:30 in the morning. And I said, nope. I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I said, I'm done, man. And the drummer kind of agreed with me, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, man, I said, I'm beat, man. My hand's killing me. I said, I'm done. And man, the guy that was the band leader got so teed off at me. I mean, really teed off at me. He wouldn't even talk to me. Oh. So I packed up my stuff, and this was on Saturday night, and I went home. On Tuesday, there was a letter in my mailbox saying I was fired. And I was kind of like, well, you know what? If you're going to get fired, if you're going to get fired from a band, that's a pretty good last gig. It was like nothing else, man. Oh, wow. That was probably one of the worst gigs I've ever played, man, without a doubt.
That's pretty good, though.
But there's a whole raft of them. There's anybody that's played for any amount of time has got all the wacky stories, man.
So now, so what are you doing now musically?
Well, during COVID, you know, when everything shut down, I was like, well, I think that year we were still playing in the Roadhouse Kings.
Yeah.
I'd moved to Carter County, and we had booked out all of 2020. We were playing twice a month at Stovall's. And then I was playing twice a month at the Venice. And Dennis Elsie and Jeff Lockheed, that owned both those places, that accommodated me to no end to make sure that I could play Stovall's on Friday, Venice on Saturday. Yeah. So I had 52 shows booked that year, and I think we played like maybe 6 of them, and then it all, or maybe a dozen of them or something, but by the middle of March it was all done. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I just decided I was going to learn a bunch of songs. And I just started back to the acoustic guitar, playing songs, learning songs, and so I did that. And Thane and I got together a few times during COVID. We have a little teardrop, Diana and I do, and we'd haul it up to Thane and Maria's driveway and stay there, and we'd sit outside and play songs, and we just got into doing it. And so I got to talking to Tom Cohen. His wife, Bethany, started Squires, and she's the head chef there and runs it. Tom did all the architectural work on that building, and I met Tom down at Gravity because Tom got into playing the National and got to know him well. So I called him up and said, hey, Tom, you know, would you give Thane and I a night or two, a month? He goes, well, you know, how about if you just played every other Friday from 7 to 9? I'm like, okay. So we've been on that for, I don't know, at least a couple years. Yeah. And so I'm still doing that. Then I'm still playing with Liquid Gold, play steel with Liquid Gold. That thing I do with Thane, I play acoustic guitar. Yeah. He plays mandolin. We both sing. We do songs.
Right. No, that's a great duo.
It's a lot of fun, man. I'll tell you, talk about playing with somebody that will lift you up. Right on. Man, I mean, anybody that's played with Thane Bradford would tell you the same thing, man. Right. And so many of our musical brothers are like that to me. Charlie, I'm not going to name any more names because I'm going to leave a bunch of people out, and I don't want to slight anybody. Yeah. But like all my old homegrown brothers, all these people, man, they elevate your playing, and it's such a gift, man, to play with people like that. Yeah. But and then I'm still playing with Liquid Gold, typically once a month at the Venice. Oh, okay. And I would say this to people: if you have not seen Liquid Gold in the last 3 or 4 years, I'd encourage you to come out and see the band, because Liquid Gold's been this big evolution over the last
long time.
I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah, maybe 20.
And it is absolutely one of the most fun bands I've ever played in.
Yeah.
But nobody takes the music as a lark. I mean, we all love the music and we all try to play it to the best of our abilities, but it's a fun band at the same time, you know. And so it's been a great band. And Jackie Nabilski and Mike Long, our buddy Mole Reeves, who is unfortunately not well and hasn't played with the band in a long time, but ask everybody to send up some prayers and good vibes to our buddy Mole.
Right on.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's kind of what's happening
okay.
now, and I got some friends I jam with down in Carter County.
And you're still building a few instruments?
Yep. Still, seems like I've always got one instrument in the works, if not a couple. So I just finished up a bass for a friend of mine down there, an electric bass, and I'm starting in on a new lap steel build.
And you're doing these, your satisfaction, you know, your
yeah. It's just sort of I'm not building anything for anybody in particular. I have a pile of wood, I have some parts, you know, and I have a bunch of ideas, and so it's like, well, I start working on the drawing. You know, I've always loved the engineering drawing side of things too. It always has just been really appealed to me. So I always love getting a drawing up and working on it and getting all this, you know, trying to get a good idea of what I'm going to do. And I just build what I think might yield a good sounding and good playing instrument and something aesthetically that would appeal to people.
Wow.
And I don't have any of them left. I mean, somehow or another people will see something, or they'll call me and say, hey, is that thing still around? Would you want to sell it? You know? So I'm not actively really pursuing that hard, but I'm still pursuing it, but just not like...
You're doing what you want, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. At the level that
and Leonardo da Vinci, I guess. Huh?
Oh, man, I'll tell you, you know, I want to watch, you know, I guess, was it Ken Burns?
I saw that, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I've only seen one part of one episode, and holy cow.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe one person could even be like that.
I know. Well,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
There's Da Vinci and then there's Higgins, you know?
No, not quite, Vince. That's ridiculous. Now, I didn't know there was going to be a comedy program.
No, listen.
Now, I'd also like to say something right now.
Yeah, sure.
And that is, I would like to thank my wife, Diana.
Yes.
She is so supportive of all of my efforts. And, you know, and I'm supportive. She's a master gardener, and she has a bunch of other interests, so I try to be supportive of all of her efforts as well. But, you know, music can really kind of become a bone of contention in a relationship. You know, for better or for worse, it's part of the reality of it. And but she has been so supportive of my efforts, and you know, it's not like, oh, go do whatever you want. It's not like that.
Yeah.
But she's really in tune to what I do and has learned. You know, trying to learn what the brain of a musician is like good luck.
Yeah.
You know, and she'd never been around that very much before, but she's really been great about all of it, and I'm super grateful for her.
Right. Well, well, she's a great person, man.
Yeah.
So you're lucky.
You
dude.
can't help, if you meet her, you can't help but
That's
love her.
right. That's right.
She's
that's
a real
great.
gem.
Wow. Well said, John. Well, I'm gonna thank you for coming over and taking time with us over here at Ear-Wicker, and appreciate you spilling your history.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. There's one other thing I'd like to mention, is that back in my early 20s, I ran across Rick Ganaway and John Hillerin at Merrimack, and they were playing banjo and guitar and singing some songs, and I wasn't playing with anybody at the time, and I'd known Hillboy from high school, and Rick I kind of remembered from some point, and we started playing some music together. Tom Wood kind of got involved,
Right, yeah.
and the next thing you know, we've got this band, and then all of a sudden it turns into a real band.
Yeah.
And for 5 years, I mean, we just ground it, playing 20 or 25 shows a month. It's a union band. We're traveling and playing on union contracts, and I am so grateful to all those guys. Art Ruprecht, too, and Dave Jones, rest in peace, brother Dave. That was an education in itself.
What was the name of that band?
That was the Homegrown Harvest Band. Yep. And I need to thank all of those guys, and they're all like brothers to me, and they all mean the world to me.
Great,
And but I'd also like to thank all the people that for years I would see come to shows, and I'd see somebody at a bar, and I'm like, well, they must like hanging out here, because every time I come and play here, they're here. Yeah. And then after a while, it's like it comes through your dumb brain. It's like, well, they're here to see your band play, or the band that you're playing, and they there's so many people in St. Louis that have supported live music so much, and I finally started to understand it, and I've really been trying to thank people at shows and individually. But to everybody that's come out and supported any musical endeavor I've been involved in, I want to say thank you. Yeah. And to anybody that goes out and supports live music, I just want to thank every one of you.
Yeah. I think St. Louis has some of the most knowledgeable music fans,
Absolutely.
In the country, I think.
Yeah, I'm here to agree with you.
You said it well, Yeah. So,
well, thanks a million for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a ball, and the Ear-Wicker is great. I'm glad you're doing it.
Oh, good.
I'm really glad you're doing it. I remember listening to Thanes, and I found out a couple things that I had no idea about him. I've known him for years, so it was really awesome.
Well, that's great. Yeah, well, that's what we want to do. Well, listen, John, we will see you at the next gig.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Vince.
If you'd like to speak with Ear-Wicker Podcast, please email us at vincentcorkery57@gmail.com.